Go on, Jake.
Welcome to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Tonight is Thursday, July 27th, 2017. I thought I'd start off with quickly on SPACEWEATHER.com. It's been a while since I have consistently reported on this, but I've mentioned this before during the Grand Solar Minimum. This page can be a little boring. We've had some action recently. We've seen the solar wind speed sustained in the 600 kilometers per second. But tonight we are seeing different conditions. Obviously, solar wind speed sitting at 435.1 kilometers per second, density of 5.2. Today is day one of a new stretch of 0 sunspots. Now, yesterday I was half tempted to make a video. AR 2668 was spotted, but just like AR 2667, which or I'm sorry, it was 2666 that just developed out of nowhere over top of AR 2665. This one here fizzled out very fast, so there was really nothing to talk about. It was a very weak sunspot. Like I said, it stuck around for one day. And now we add number 52 days without a spot. We are now at 25% of the year of spotless days, and we're halfway through the year. So you do the math. KP indices are sitting at 2. 24-hour is also at a 2. And of course, looking at the SDO right now, there is a coronal hole that's turning towards the Earth that is just below the equatorial region. They are saying that we could see the effects of this coronal hole sometime around July 31st, which is Monday. And then I wanted to show you something real quick. And Lee, thanks for being on again tonight.
Not a problem. So can you go back though real quick before we go to jump to this?
Okay, sure.
All right, so you see the coronal hole there?
Yeah.
And you see that we do have some type of a flaring next to that?
On so that which side?
Well, right, you see the equatorial region, and then you see the coronal hole that's coming into view to the center of the equatorial region. Then beside that, you see a little bit more activity.
Yeah.
That's one of those cases where, because you have those additional particles pouring out of that hole, if you were to have a magnetic umbral or something there break loose, that could accelerate those particles. And you could get a little bit more of a bump out of that if something like that were to happen here in the next few days, as that gets a little bit more to the right of the center part of the disk there. So as that would be, in front of us, because we're a moving target. So you got to lead us, of course.
Sure.
So, that would be the only concern from there. It doesn't look like there's going to be much concern, because this is actually the first time I've looked at it today. But that's, I'm just trying to explain. It's those types of conditions that you need to be aware of when you do have the flaring next to a coronal hole stream. And that's going to be a very small coronal hole stream. It's nothing to worry about at this point in time.
I have a quick question for you, too, while we're looking at this. There was I've seen a lot of attention on this, this grouping here that is facing away from Earth. It's Earth turning away now. Do you know anything about, have you seen the images that it was presenting when it was directly Earth facing?
In reference to what, as far as how dark it was, or what are you, I'm not sure exactly what part of the sun you're talking about.
How dark it is, I can't remember the angstrom it was. It was in a very, it was almost like a staticky version of an angstrom, but it had speckles of green in it and yellow. I think it had all angstroms in it, but it was different. Anyway, it just looked like that it was a sunspot. Is this where the 2668 might have developed from?
Yeah, I haven't looked at 2668, so I can't tell you.
That was the region that it was reported at yesterday.
Yeah, again, I haven't researched it today, so I couldn't tell you. Sorry.
I just wondered if there was anything peculiar about that particular grouping there. It's not a sunspot. There's no coronal hole, but yet we're seeing like a little action here. I was just curious if you had any thoughts on that.
It's just not up to the point of being a sunspot yet. And this is where you look at Valentina Zarkova's work, and where it shows that we have the two magnetic fields that are going 180 degrees out of phase, and they're canceling each other out. So as that happens, the magnetic fields on the surface of the sun, in the magnetosphere part of it, right down at the, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it right at this particular moment, but anyway, where all of the base of the magnetic umbrals are. And so when that weakens, that magnetic field, there is not enough energy there to create sunspots. So as we move further into this, not in the current cycle we're in, but in the cycle after it, and then the cycle after that is when we're in a maximum part of that. But as we move into that, the amount of sunspots we will see will dramatically decrease. And there can be a period for up to, 20 years, maybe even longer, where we don't see a sunspot at all.
Yeah.
When we're in the middle of this, and we're talking about that would be 14 years out from now.
I was looking, SPACEWEATHER.com gives you a history. I think it goes back 8 years, and it shows how many days without a sunspot. In 2009 was 260 days without a sunspot. And then, of course, in 2010, as it was moving away from its minimum into the next maximum, 51 days. And then 2011 was only 2 days. And then 12 and 13 was 0. 14 had 1 day without a spot, and 0. So basically, from 2011 and 2015, there was a total of, it looks like 3 sunspots, which would definitely signify that we were in a maximum. And now in 16, there was 32 spotless days. And of course, that number has dramatically increased already the following year. So this is this is definitely the signature of going into a minimum.
Right. And when you go back in history and you look at all of the minimums, and you look at the lows between the cycles of the minimums, you will find that you have these, spotless days measured in the hundreds. And then when you are at a maximum, you don't. When you're down at a minimum, you still have a few spots going by. So like you bottom out at like 25 or something. Whereas that when you're in a minimum, you're bottoming out at 0 like we are right now. So, I mean, this is all telltale signs. When you look at the drop off, I was just looking at this last night on one of the charts. This is the steepest drop off that I can find in recorded history for TSI. I mean,
Yeah.
in sunspot activity. Of going back all the data I can find, as far as everything that's been put together through all of the different core samples and tree rings and the 17 different data sets from coral reefs and stalactites and so on and so forth. Also counting up the carbon-14 data to be able to go back and reconstruct the sunspot data all the way back to 1610, and the TSI and so on and so forth, going along with that. When you look at it, this is very, very steep, and it's much, much steeper than anything I have seen in any of the minimums or even any kind of cycle. And I want to get that chart up one day, and we'll show how steep that is. It's staggering how far we've fallen, and there's no pulling out. It's like a plane, in a nosedive. The plane goes so fast. There's what's called a V&E. That's the velocity never to exceed, because if you go faster than that, the wings fall off or rip off, actually. So we're in that nosedive, and that V&E for us, velocity never to exceed, is 1,360 watts. And once we plunge below that wattage, we've got some real issues. We have already plunged down, and within the last 2 weeks, we've been all the way as far down as 1360.1 of where we were hanging out around 1360.8. So that's one of the key indicators we need to watch for, as well as the increase in galactic cosmic rays that we've got coming in, and then the voltage potential difference between our atmosphere and space. And the image that you're seeing on the screen right there is a prime example of how our ionosphere is dropping in its voltage potential, which means that the voltage potential between the surface of the Earth and space, the different layers, is going to increase because one of the differentiating layers is decreasing. So we're going to see some really crazy lightning here really soon if this continues to keep up like this. And
Yeah.
snow and rain and hail and storms and rain bombs and all kinds of the things that I've been talking about for over a year now are actually starting to come to fruition and they're world news now.
This gigantic jet was located over Hawaii, and I did a report a couple weeks ago. I believe the location of the one was it China or Japan? I think it was China, and it wasn't nowhere near the size of this one, nor as defined as this one. And again, that only has to do with the amount of highly charged particles that we have in our atmosphere right now. And SPACEWEATHER.com also, basically mocks or repeats what I'm saying when it comes to that. And the thing that I found kind of interesting about that was that it says here, fledgling solar wind pressure, weakening sunspot magnetic fields allow more cosmic rays into the inner solar system, a trend which is expected to continue for a few years to come. But I find it, thinking about it now, taking into consideration that we're not just, we're moving through the galaxy. When you hear that because of this, it's not just our atmosphere that we're seeing, it's the inner solar system that we're seeing these increase in cosmic rays and charged particles. So, I never really thought about it broadly like that, but because of the weak magnetic field from the sun, that makes sense to me. There's more highly charged and cosmic rays coming through into the inner solar system. So, which leads me to the next thing. And Lee, I wanted you to kind of take charge on this next topic before we run on to some video footage. We've got a very exciting announcement next week, either sometime Tuesday morning, I believe, waiting to hear back. But we have nailed down Valentina Zarkova. Lee has been the person who has introduced me to her work. And again, this is just another piece of the puzzle that goes into the picture with this grand solar minimum.
Well, and Valentina's work, when you look at what she has done and her expertise in magnetic fields and how they interact, I mean, it's just a natural for someone with her talent to come out with this. I mean, because it's right down her alley. And she didn't. The crazy part about it is she has no dog in the fight. She doesn't care one way or the other about how it affects climate. That's not what her job was. She was just trying to figure out what the magnetic fields of the sun did and show. And when she came out with her research, all these people from IPCC and all these other people just had a cow about it and tried to have her shut down and, sent emails to the Royal Observatory saying, oh, you can't publish this. And the Royal Observatory is like, look, these are accredited people. They have peer-reviewed work. We agree with, what their findings are. Other institutions around the world has confirmed her work based on the data from Wilcox Observatory in California that's been watching the sun since like 1953 or 54 or 56 or back in the 50s, but a long time. And when they look at the models going back and what she has produced, it all lines up. And it shows that we're going into this. We see the effects of it. It's predicted because we can see what's happening. It's a trend. You can't stop it in the middle. You know, it's kind of like a top spinning. It's going to spin and do what it's going to do. And we see that it's going around this way. Well, then it's going to keep going around this way. This is the angle of it. We can project it. This is what's happening. That's why when we were talking to Dr. Casey the other evening, and he said, well, when we get a few more years into the next solar cycle, we'll be able to determine exactly where we're going. In my prediction method, I don't have to wait until we go into the next solar cycle to determine where we're going. I can project on my system, or as far as my model works, is by the current conditions and any variations of those current conditions to change the trajectory of the current path or trajectory. And so I base all of my models on the current trajectory and any variation from that trajectory in real time, the same way that I would be calculating the trajectory of a spacecraft or something prior to leaving our atmosphere as it interacts with the air currents, or as it on its re-entry as to where we're going to land, I guess would actually be more appropriate. So that's how my model works. And that's why I agree with what the Russians are saying in my model and agree with Valentina Zarkova's work, is because everything that they have predicted within their models, we are actually seeing in real-time observations of the sun, the solar system, our atmosphere, magnetosphere, and so on and so forth. So we are keeping track, and very good track, of what is taking place. And we are seeing that we are falling short of where we really thought we would be, which means if you're falling short, you're going to be colder. So we're on the bottom side of everybody's model as it stands right now.
So, in hearing that, you were talking about this was the steepest drop off you've seen, and the charts are freakish, and I think that's why I probably have paid more attention here lately than I had maybe in the beginning. I was reading, I just wasn't really studying like I am now. Mari's going to roll some footage of a video she put together.
Well, when you look at the charts and you see that drop off, normally when you get down to the bottom where we're at with the 0 sunspots, there's a little bit of a pull out, right? And you start to pull out and go down through the valley, and then you start going back up again. We're not pulling out. It's a straight line. It's like you just picked a point and then put a straight edge there and just drew it straight down to the bottom. We're not pulling out at all. And the problem is we've reached that point of where, hey buddy, we should have been pulling out. And if we don't pull out, we're going to smack the ground really quick. And we've already passed that point. We're continuing past that point each day. We passed that point back in May, and we haven't pulled out. In fact, we've pushed in on the stick a little bit, and we're diving even farther and faster than we were before. So something's got to give here pretty quick, or everybody's going to get a really, really rude awakening.
This image I'm sharing with everyone right now, I've gotten an email from this person before. They're the ones that are in Southwest France talking about the extreme weather. And this is basically after a windstorm, hailstorm, just they're getting freakish thunderstorms they're not used to seeing. But this is pretty much the state of his peach crop right now. And I can't imagine how much money is on the ground right there. And he's saying everybody, his neighbors up and down the road out there, they all same thing. Watching some of these hail videos and the flooding videos, I understand there's a lot more social media access now, but there is no way that this is always, I had a comment that someone said that this is just weather. You're confusing it with the climate or something strange like that, as if to say that this type of stuff's been happening for years. This is nothing new. But I don't remember it being in the frequency that it's in right now, Lee. It's everywhere. And to see things like this, I mean, this is devastating to a farmer.
Well, and he is not the only farmer. This is not the only crop. This is not the only country. We have farmers suffering right here in this country right now with lost crops. Look up around Illinois where they had 30 inches of rain since the beginning of the year. Look in Kansas City where we've got flooding going on right now. Look at the flooding that's going on to the east of that around St. Louis and so on and so forth. These are just the beginnings of this. These are all the regions that I told you were going to be flooded. They're being flooded exactly like I said that they were going to be flooded. And they are going to continue to be flooded like this and even much, much, much worse than what you're seeing right now. This is nothing. And then the video today out of El Paso, Texas, of the rain bomb, it actually looks like a shock wave on the radar moving out from the radar when it comes down and hits. It's the most impressive radar footage of a rain bomb I've ever seen in my life. It's go on the Weather Channel. They're talking about it. You'll see it.
Yeah, we were going to get to that as well. With that rain bomb as well, they were talking about they had somewhere in the Missouri area around 7 inches of rain overnight. I think they said it fell within 4 hours.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, the people in Frostburg, Maryland, were complaining that they had, I think, 36 inches of rain since January 1st this year. The people in southern Illinois, for the month of June, they are at 600% of their monthly rainfall average. The city of Gainesville, Florida, has received 30 inches of rain in just the month of June alone. So, again, this is more cosmic rays, more cloud nucleation, more clouds, more rain, more floods. And this is the trend you were talking about, cosmic rays going up over the next few years. The models I've seen say that we're going to have increases in galactic cosmic rays all the way through 2100.
Jeez.
So, you know, this is just, these people haven't seen anything yet. All these buildings that you see in these video images that are still standing, that are next to the structures that are falling into the water, they won't be a few years from now. They'll be washed downstream just like all the rest of this. These people that are getting flooded like this is not a once in a 200-year flood. They come around once every 200 years because this is a 200-year cycle. But this is going to become a regular occurrence, and they are going to be much, much worse than this because of the fact that we have the urbanization. We do not have the absorption into the earth of any of this rain in the urban areas. You have all the runoff of all the parking lots, all the buildings, all the streets, all the highways, the interstates. They try to funnel that down into these narrow waterways, and it backs up, and this is what you get. And this is just going to become a regular, everyday occurrence around the globe, as you are seeing right now. Somebody is washed away by these things every day in major metropolitan areas around the world, and it's only going to get worse.
You know, last couple weeks here in the Buffalo area, we haven't seen anything this extreme, but I was shocked. I know some people who have called in claims on loss on their property, their homes, automobiles have been claimed. I've just, look, I saw the rain. I couldn't believe that much rain brought that much damage to our area. And it's not even nowhere near what, we're talking about. We're talking about 4 inches in a half hour. This fell, what, Mari? How long do you think it took for all that to? The second storm we had was 20 minutes. It was puddling up within 20 minutes. Yeah. But the first one was kind of combined with an all morning rain, and then we got a downpour.
It started just drizzling all day, and then it just like flash flood.
Yeah, out of nowhere, it just opened up. And then the 7 days after that, it was just a 20-minute downpour, but it flooded everything out again. The sewers were overflowing.
Well, you have record rainfall for this year. Buffalo, New York has 30 inches since January 1st. That's a record. It was announced today by the Weather Service. So that's why I have been looking at the sun. I've been looking at all the, atmospheric compression events that are taking place all over the world. And, when you talk about the radar showing the amount of precipitation, it gets red, it gets darker red, it gets really, really dark red. And then it gets so dark red, it almost turns black, and then it does turn black. And then lo and behold, when you get past black, which is very, very rare to see, it actually turns white, which I had never seen before until today.
Yeah.
Or actually, I think I may have seen it one other time during the atmospheric compression event that went from New Mexico all the way to the East Coast. That one I predicted 3 days before it happened, along with the snow on one of your shows. And we're going to see more of this, and the flooding that they've got coming through West Virginia and Tennessee and all the central part of the U.S. right there. That's the area that I've been saying is going to get walloped by both rain and cold weather. So they need to be prepared for it right there. This is just a taste of what's coming. And, the people in northern Illinois, I talked to one of my friends up there that grows hops, and I said, "How's your crop going?" He said, "I ain't gonna have no crop." He said, "The water in the fields is as deep as the axle on a tractor."
Wow.
I said, "What about people near you?" He goes, "Everybody's got the same problem." He said, "It won't stop raining." He said, "I've been here for years. I ain't never seen anything like this." He said, "And every year it's worse." I was like, "Well, this is what I've been telling you." He goes, "I know, Lee. That's why I watch your shows." So,
Got a comment in the chat. He's been a sub of ours probably from the very beginning. I think a couple months. We're pretty new, but he says just saw a microburst at El Paso, 70-mile-an-hour downdraft that spread out like a nuke.
there you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Exactly what I'm talking about. And people get used to that. And when that happens, you can see horizontal wind speeds of excess of 125 miles an hour.
Gee.
So, yeah, and it rips stuff apart. I mean, takes windows out, furniture, all kinds of stuff. So when you see those, supercells, those giant cumulus nimbus that look like they're a little bit taller than they should be, start, picking up the lawn furniture, getting the kids in, because these things don't give any warning. And, 5 minutes later, what you see on the screen is what's rolling down through your neighborhood or through the downtown part of the city. I mean, these things don't play. The one city that had, I think it was 130,000 vehicles totaled in 15 minutes in China, because they had an automobile factory and this, all the city workers had cars and everything. It totally devastated this province with all of the hail damage. Did it in 15 minutes, and it looked like this. I mean, because it melted and washed away. So we're going to continue to see more of this. If you live near a stream, you live near a river, you need to be aware that things like this can and will be coming your way. I mean, that's a cart moving down the street there.
Yeah, and where we live at, we've got Lake Erie. We're by a lot of water, but there's an interesting question in the chat, and I don't know if you could even answer this or not. But I've kind of noticed it too. Someone here commented that they live in Chicago, and they said it seems like that they live in a bubble because everything's happening. Like everybody's getting it real bad around them in that city. And I kind of thought the same thing. We live in Buffalo, and there's times where we get storms that are coming in off the lake, and it looks like everybody else it gets pounded, but we're like right dab in the middle where there's nothing going on. Is it just a coincidence, or is there a connection between big cities and weather?
It's not just big cities. There's a lot that plays into this. So you have the temperature difference between the city and the rural area. You have the topographical difference or the terrain difference between the rural areas and the city. You have differences in air patterns as the way the winds blow around in those regions. And then you also have updrafts because of areas that are, have different colors. So they, as far as absorption of the light, darker areas absorb more, lighter areas reflect more. You have updrafts of thermal columns coming up off of lakes. So all of those things play into it and affect it. And I've noticed that all over the world when I zoom in on particular storms and watch as they go over particular regions and see how those effects of terrain interact with the storm. And they are quite significant as to how they roll out. So it depends upon where it's coming from. But yes, they are absolutely right. You get bubbles. There's certain areas on our ranch here that we get more rain than we do on other parts of the ranch. And it's that way regular. I mean, you know, we're 3.5 square miles here. So it's a fairly substantial, but we've got lakes and they interact with how the rain comes down on the ranch, because you can see a storm coming, and when they get to the lake, they'll either go around it and not rain right at the lake, or they'll just pour right out where the lake is, and other parts of the ranch won't get as much rain. So we've recorded as much as 2 inches difference in rain from one end of the ranch to the other in the same rainstorm.
I wanted to stop right here and show you this. Lee, have you ever seen hail damage on a plane like this before?
Not until very recently. I have actually seen worse hail damage than that. But that's scary right there. If I was in the cockpit of that, I would definitely need to be visiting the restroom after the aircraft.
Yeah, I'd be sweating bullets. I couldn't imagine, like, you know, these kudos to these pilots. They spend all these hours, and you know, I don't know, can a simulator prepare you for an event like this?
No simulator prepares you for an event like that. You know, in the military, that's when we were training soldiers, you know, they were trying to train these guys in simulators and then send them out, you know, and train them. And I was like, you are absolutely crazy. That will not work. You cannot induce the stress load onto that soldier when he is standing inside of an air-conditioned room wearing a visor. I said, if you want to induce stress on him, you let me put smoke and bombs and simulated artillery rounds falling in on top of him, and let me shoot him with what's called simunitions, which are simulated bullets that are just little things of kind of like soap pellets that you shoot your adversary with, and, you know, everybody wears protective gear. And so, you know, we won out with that because they were spending millions to do simulations. Simulations are great if you want to teach somebody the theory of operation. But when you want to really test their skill or see what their intestinal fortitude is, you actually have to take them out into the real world and subject them to extremely grueling conditions. And I'm here to tell you, the fellows that were behind the stick of that aircraft were in what I considered extremely grueling conditions. To do that to the nose, the windshield, and especially to the leading edge of that aircraft. I mean, you're talking about being able to affect the slats on the front of that aircraft and affect its aerodynamic performance on its approach to the runway. If one of those comes down and the other does not, if you do not have an experienced pilot behind the stick or rudder of that aircraft, there's a good possibility that plane's going to be on the ground because of the significant aerodynamic characteristic differences between one lifting surface and the other on the opposite side of the aircraft. So on the side of the aircraft that the slat comes down on, that wing will dive up in the air and it'll roll over in the opposite direction of the wing that the slat actually deploys on. So yeah, that's extremely dangerous conditions. I mean, look at all of those all along there. Yeah, those guys. I'm telling you,
that plane didn't come apart. I mean, thank God this plane obviously was put together well. But man, and you know, and I'm looking at the chat too while you're talking about this, and you know, we're talking about tornadoes and spots that people aren't used to. Toronto, 10 minutes away. Last week, I was talking to a guy in Nova Scotia where it was 100 degrees, and there was a tornado warning there. Buffalo, we had a tornado in Hamburg, New York. Some of that footage actually made national news. I seen the part where a car and a trailer were lifted up off the driveway. That was on the Weather Channel. That was 20 minutes away from our house. This area doesn't get tornadoes, and this is the second time. actually this month, I think that we've had tornado warnings in the Buffalo area. So very interesting times right now. This weather is crazy. Every time Mari shows me, because Mari does a good job, she looks for this kind of stuff every day. And a lot of this footage that we're looking at right now, folks, it's mostly from social media. And thank God that we have people out there who have, hopefully they're safe when they're filming these videos, because you know, I wouldn't want to be joking around in some of these situations here. But again, thanks to people being smart and recording this, documenting this footage. Otherwise, you know, it's not on CBS News. It's not on Fox News. It's not being reported at all in the mainstream. So nobody knows about this. So when people like Lee and I start talking about the grand solar minimum and talking about a cooling effect, they look at us like we're nuts, because all they hear in the mainstream media is that we're warming and that the planet is, you know, heating up and it's going to continue to warm up. And, you know, so I get it now.
Yeah, and it's just going to continue to get worse. These are just previews. Okay, the grand finale is not until 30 years from now. You know, this is going to be the biggest fireworks display you've ever seen in your life. And the guy just now pulled the first fuse out of the box. He hasn't even struck it yet.
Well, a question came to me in the chat, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lee. The gentleman asked me how long, what's the starting period and what's the end time on the grand solar minimum. I had told him, you know, we should be settled into it around 2019, 2020. And, you know, it's believed to last for at least 42 years. He asked me, when did it start? In 2015. And I told him 16. Is that correct?
It's the you can actually go and look at the solar sunspot count and look at the date of the second peak of our current solar cycle. The second peak, its highest date, whatever that date is, was the beginning of the grand solar minimum. I knew it, but since my incident, I can't remember it. But
Sure.
I'll remember it again. But anyway, that date is the beginning of it. So we will go through this cycle. We will finish this cycle. It will be even weaker. So we're in solar cycle 24. We will go into solar cycle 25, which will only be, as far as its sunspot count, not more than 70% of what the peak of this sunspot cycle was. Okay, so whatever they've calculated the peak at, our next solar cycle will not exceed 70% of that in any way, shape, or form. More than likely, it'll be closer to 50%. The following solar cycle after that will be solar cycle 26. I see basically no sunspots in solar cycle 26. I base that upon historic data and what I have gleaned from Valentina Zarkova's work, and we will talk to her about that when we have her present. Solar cycle 27 following that should be a mirror of what solar cycle 25 was. And then we can possibly come up after that. Now, the problem is that when you're at a minimum like this, people say solar cycles are 11 years. No, solar cycles vary. During an extremely active year, they can be as short as like 7 or 8 years. And during an extremely inactive year at a solar minimum or during grand solar minimums, they can stretch out to 13 to 14 years. So if you look at that in this case, so here we are, we're at, 2017 coming up on 2018. So you might as well say by the time we're done with this one, we're going to be close to 2020. Okay, or just starting into the next one by 2020. So if we're into the next one by 2020, that'll be at the beginning of 25. So we've got 25, 26, and 27. If they're 14 years each, that will be 42 years. So 42 years on top of 2020 is 2062 before you think about seeing any warmth again from this particular event. My particular thought on this is we actually won't see any significant warming prior to 2100. So the warmest days you have ever lived in your life, you are living in them now. And if you live where I'm at, you are already 2 degrees Fahrenheit below average for the last 3 months.
I've gotten a lot of comments about,
Yeah, and I want to answer people's questions. So whatever they've got, let's let them have them, you know.
and most of them have been pretty right on with, no one's asking anything silly. I think everybody's been pretty serious about comments and questions, and I'm really happy to see that because, we're trying to raise awareness. Lee has been an amazing wealth of information for us. So it's good to see the interaction here. And I'm glad that we've gotten a lot of people's attention. This channel's grown quite a bit. We're proud that we had John Casey on. We're proud to be having Valentina Zarkova on. And like I said, the main message through this channel is awareness and what to do. And, of course, we're going to report on our current weather, our current solar weather. That's a given. But the secondary, in me, I still think it's part of the primary reason that we do this channel is to raise awareness. Lee donates his time, and Mari donates a lot of her time in between her job to present this information and to make sure that it's laid out where everyone can make sense of it. And Lee, I can't thank you enough because there's been several times where during our shows, just when I think I had an understanding on something, I gained even a firmer grasp on it. And it's just helped me realize what we're doing here and how serious it is. And I think that's what motivates me to continue to speak on this and continue to report on this. And hopefully we get to do this for a long time. I don't know. There's so many unknowns with the solar minimums. There's so many unknowns to our infrastructure, our grid systems, and then, of course, the crop failure. So, I'm not trying to be gloom and doom, but, we can't take what we have right now for granted because I don't know, 8, 12 years from now, are we going to be able to broadcast like this?
Well, yeah, nobody knows that. All we know is what has happened historically. And what we do is we go back historically and we look at all of the solar cycles that mimic this one. And we say, okay, if it does this, what did it do after that? And that's how John Casey was able to discover the double peak, with the second peak being significantly higher than the first during the sunspot count, to show of what happens prior to going into a minimum. So you go back, and the closest thing that looked like this, as far as when I was lining it up, was when we fell off from the Dalton minimum. But if you go and you compare those two overlays, you will find that the Dalton minimum was not nearly as steep, and the Dalton minimum started pulling out before now. And so that is what leads me to believe that we will dive deeper than what we did in the Dalton and going down into the Maunder minimum, as far as how we're falling off on our TSI, our sunspot count, solar wind speed, and the voltage potential difference between our ionosphere and space. So those are going to be issues that are going to be brought out and be made abundantly clear and front and center world news here in the near future, because there will come a point where everybody's going to be seeing these things and start freaking out over it, because at the rate of increase that I am seeing, we are far, far outpacing my worst predictions.
Well, and I'm going to tell you folks right now that Lee is being G-rated right now when it comes to his opinion, or his findings, really. So just know that we've talked about this, and the acceleration of some of these events. I remember when we started talking about the grand solar minimum, you really had believed that the events that are happening right now were still about 1.5 years, 2 years out.
Yes.
So
What we are seeing right now, as far as the rate of the atmospheric compression, the rate of the crop destruction, the amount of flooding that is taking place, the amount of cloud cover we're seeing, the increased lightning strikes as far as their intensity and more prevalent positive lightning strikes, the blue jets, the super jets, the sprites, the gnomes, all of that stuff, the Birkeland currents that are coming in, all of those things were not supposed to be here. None of those things were supposed to be here until 2018 at the earliest. And I thought that they would start to become more prevalent about 2020. And these giant sprites and the positive lightning are coming about, a full 18 to 24 months ahead of schedule for me. Actually, even more than that. We're talking 36 months because we were seeing the positive lightning at the beginning of 2017.
I'm going to ask
Look at this.
the comment. Wow, look at that system.
This is that hailstorm over Croatia moving in.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I have a comment here in the chat, and I want to get the part of New Zealand before I get into this comment that he just made. Basically, he said he wanted to mention to you and myself that New Zealand Met Service has admitted summer did not happen in New Zealand last year, and they are warning it could happen again this year.
It will happen again this year. There's the effect that we see with the Arctic air moving down from the North Pole, moving down across Canada and down into the northern latitudes of the United States. That exact same thing is happening on the South Pole as well. So that cold air is going to be moving up, and
Mark,
all of those people down there on the southern end are going to be subjected to unbelievable weather, flooding, and much, much colder weather than they're used to.
here is this is Vegas, Lee. I don't.
Yes.
I can't believe. I mean, I'm just. It throws me for a loop when I see Vegas.
Well, what threw me for a loop was all the time that I had spent out at White Sands, and not seeing rainstorms out there, and then when it does rain, it doesn't rain torrential, and then just seeing what got dropped out there today, I was like in awe because of all the time that I had spent out there and never seen anything like that on the radar. That's what just blew me away when I saw that radar image of the area and how big the storms were.
And that's
It's
just what, a flash
very
flood?
uncommon. Yeah, this is.
Wow. Comment also reporting 58 glaciers in New Zealand, and they're expanding.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep, that is correct. And they are all over the world.
And the location is Wellington, but he says, but really it's the entire New Zealand. It's Wellington mainly, but he says it's all of New Zealand. And we have a contact in New Zealand, which we'll get a hold of him. We're quite close to him, so I'm sure he could give us. He has told me that the weather is different. That's as far as he's willing to go with it. I don't think he's quite on board with the grand solar minimum, and
More of a warming.
and yet he's a person that's convinced that we're going to continue to warm, but that's okay. I mean, you can't blame people for thinking that way when the mainstream and the government, they're hiding information from the public. And I don't know why they would hide stuff like this, because this is something that if you prepare and have enough time to get ready for, you can thrive. So why wouldn't this be something that you would share with the entire population? I don't understand why it's being blocked, basically.
Well, they don't want it getting out. That's not part of their agenda. And, they can try to hide it all they want, but there are people around the world just like us that are preparing. I mean, I'm doing some preparing and putting together lists of equipment and so on and so forth for numerous different people now, for preparation of what they need to have as far as food stocks, equipment, batteries, solar panels, chargers, well pumps, security communications, cameras, backup systems, first aid supplies, medical supplies, what they will have in their seed inventory and how many of each, canned goods, water purification, night vision equipment, thermal imagers, ammunition, types of ammunition, all of that is part of the packages that I am offering to these people for their independent efforts. So it doesn't matter if the news media wants to get it out or not. People around the world are preparing, governments around the world are preparing, and the number of people in the United States that is preparing is growing astronomically. I'm receiving calls every day now. So, it's coming together. I'm glad that we have a forum here that we can take all of the knowledge that we glean from all of these different researchers, and then we can try to determine what the effects are going to be based on historic data and determine the best course of action for each individual person, and then show them where they can get whatever equipment, supplies, or information on how to do things, because I don't want us just to show the news of what's happening. I want us to be providing solutions and things that people can do in their own homes that are cost effective, robust, will last a long time, and protect their electronics against all types of hazards, not just from the sun or CMEs, but whether that short fat guy over in North Korea wants to do something stupid. So, all of these things that we are working on and trying to present here are applicable to all of those situations. And we're just recommending everyone to be extremely well versed in what is taking place and what they can do to prepare, and have a place that they can go and see all of the different solutions that we bring together, being it in growing and generating power, storing that power, or doing lighting, refrigeration, air conditioning, water purification, or water pumping. So, all of those, as well as security and cameras and how to operate those in harsh environments.
Some really good comments in here that I raised that question about why wouldn't the government want to immediately tell everyone. Rocker78, unless they're slowly prepare the masses for what is to come, you would have panic of everyone prepping, and robbery and crimes would skyrocket. And that's probably the biggest reason why, if there is a plan to slowly leak this preparation, that one that would make the most sense to me. And one more thing before you add to that, Eric, darn right, not true. 2016 is not the hottest year for New Zealand. I wanted to bring up a really quick point. I was on NOAA looking up climate information. Folks, you have to understand something. When NOAA reports that it was the second warmest year or whatever, they're talking about the United States. They're not talking about globally. And today I did a lot of research. I had a lot of downtime, unfortunately, but I looked at some of the stuff on NOAA, and again, I don't think the full truth is being reported. They're only telling what they want to tell that fits the agenda, but they're only showing data that goes back to as far as where we came out of the last minimum, the last grand minimum. So conveniently, we have data that starts at the beginning of a new solar cycle from the 1800s all the way through to like now, of course. So,
well, they don't show the data from the 30s either, during the Dust Bowl, when it was warmer than what it is right now. And the way that they do that is they say the warmest year on record. Well, what record is that?
Right.
Since the satellite era, or since we started this new record? So they cut that off. They don't say the warmest year in history. They can't say the warmest year in history or the second warmest year in history, because they would be lying. So the way that they do it is they say the warmest year on record, and then, oh, well, our record only goes back 3 years.
Right.
Or in this case, I think 30 years. So because if it went back to the 30s, you would find out that it was much warmer then than it is now, or, even in the 80s. So, that's how we had the Dust Bowl. And so all of these different records that they show, like you said, they're bogus. It's because they say on record. It's not the entire truth. It's a partial truth.
These are the same numbers.
Cherry picking.
Yeah, these are the same numbers I see from the global warming side, and they match up with you. And you have to look at the top. It says United States, and it's like these are the same numbers that I've been told by people who believe in warming, and they try to throw them off as global, but they're not global. We're only getting what we're seeing in the United States. And again, the gentleman here from the area, New Zealand, so this guy lives there, so I don't know why he would, not be truthful, but he also made a comment here that New Zealand had snow during January, which is not normal. Of course, January would be the summertime for New Zealand since they're in the southern hemisphere. So, I mean, I'm so glad how diverse the people are here. We've got people from all over the world in this chat right now. And this is going to be the only way that we're going to be able to get truth, is seeing and hearing from people all over the world, from the horse's mouth, of what's really going on. And people are seeing it.
Right. And we need all these people from all over the world to tell their friends what the truth is and get them to, come here and share what they are seeing and share their ideas and their solutions. Because what we're here for is to inform and provide solutions so as that you are better equipped for what's coming.
And here lately, we have, I've experienced temperatures in the Buffalo area a little bit below average. And I find it hilarious every day when I look at AccuWeather and weatherchannel.com. They predict a temperature that normally we don't quite reach. We're about 2 or 3 degrees away from the high temperature that they forecast almost on a daily basis here for the last few weeks. And it's funny, in the past, we always had, we would always experience higher temperatures than what we're forecasted. Now we're seeing the opposite. And the reason why I mentioned that is because somebody in the chat had mentioned the news even lies about the temperatures. I don't think it's, well, it is lying, but I think they're fudging it to save their ass, basically.
Well, and let me explain what's going on. Okay, and this applies to the news media and the temperatures that they record and report, as well as what NOAA is recording and reporting. So when you have a string of thermometers, and let's say you have 100-mile stretch of road, and on each end of that stretch of road you have a major metropolitan city. So every 10 miles down a road, you have a thermometer that records the temperature of what's taking place. What they have now found is that those thermometers that are halfway between those two cities are reading as much as 10% cooler than what they are reading in the cities, because the thermometers in the cities are affected by what's called urban effect, which is all the air conditioners, the asphalt, the buildings, jet engines because of thermometers around airports. So you have all of these other things that are pushing the temperature up. So in one of the particular cities that I was looking at, the average temperature outside of the city was 70 degrees, but the readings that they were getting from inside the city were 10% higher. So the thermometers in the city were showing it was as high as 77 degrees, and that's what they were reporting. Then when they went and removed a bunch of the rural thermometer sets, the temperature spiked even more, and they had to go back and average it out, try to hide all that. The IPCC has already been found guilty of that, along with many other people, along with NOAA and others, as well as the European Met office over there got called out on it. So yeah, you could, if you look at the terrestrial data that is coming from the urban data sets, it will show that it is warmer. But again, that is basically caused by urban defect and not by the actual temperature of the planet. And if you will look at the actual rural data sets as well as the satellite sets, you will see that the upper atmosphere is cooler because of the cosmic rays are creating increased nucleation, which is creating more refraction, is also creating nitric oxide, which is like a giant air conditioner in our atmosphere and is making our atmosphere much cooler. That's a quote from NASA out of Goddard on their report that was released, I think, on December 7th or something like that of last year. And again, anybody that can find that report and get it to me, I'd love to see it because it disappeared shortly after it was released. So, you know, we are getting cooler. If you look at rural data sets from where you are, from where I am, and many other here in the United States, sorry about that. Many other data sets I've looked at here in the United States, you will see that on average, most of those locations are running about 2 degrees below average and have been since May.
I wanted to ask this question, Lee, because I know you do a lot of volunteer work for our sister channel, WTF Sky. And this is kind of one of these questions I think a lot of people ask because there's a lot of disinformation passed around on the internet, period, not just YouTube. It's a four-parter, basically, but it's just 4 different factors, basically. But the person asked here, don't you think chemtrails, HAARP, CERN, and polar tilt have anything to do with some of these weather anomalies?
All right, so what was that? We'll go through them one at a time. What was the first one?
Basically, they're asking, does CERN or HAARP?
Okay, first, right. So we'll do each one of those one at a time because each one of them requires its own individual response. So the first one is CERN, correct?
Yes.
Okay. CERN has nothing to do with weather other than research on how highly charged particles moving at extremely high velocities interact when those particles hit other particles. In the cloud project, the particle leaves the end of the cannon and then enters the chamber to see the reaction of the particles in there. CERN is nothing more than a giant magnetic ring that concentrates all of its magnetic energy inward. It does that for the purpose of confining the particles in the beam and knocking them out and having them go in and create the collisions that they are trying to do within their research. When a particle does create a collision within CERN, that particle is equivalent to about 200 flies bumping into one another at a time. Anyone that says that CERN is part of this cult thing hasn't done their research. All of that cult thing had something to do with a tunnel in Zurich, Switzerland, and has absolutely nothing to do with CERN. CERN does not have the ability to alter weather. CERN does not have the ability to open a portal in space. CERN does not have the ability to do anything other than particle physics in their basically accelerator there. I have friends that work there. I know people who help build the thing. I'm very familiar with what the purpose of the device does. I am very familiar with the research that device has produced and the findings of those research, because that is Dr. Kirkby's work, which we talk about on a regular basis. So CERN does not have anything to do with the grand solar minimum, does not have anything to do with weather change, does not have anything to do with changing the magnetosphere on our planet, or doing any of those other things that some other YouTube channels claim that they could do. Because when we joke and talk to when I joke and talk to the people at CERN about some of the crazy things that people say that they could do, when they go on and on about what they would do if they had that kind of power, about wow, we could do this and we could do that. God, we really wish we could do that, but you can't. There are limits to physics, and if you understand the physics, you will understand that those claims that these people are putting out are well beyond the realm of the capability of physics as anyone on this planet or in this solar system understands it. So that's the first one. What's the next one?
Chemtrails. And I know we've spoken
Chemtrails.
about this several times.
Yes. So chemtrails. Yes, they do happen. The majority of the time, what you're seeing, though, is actually not a chemtrail. It is a contrail. And it's because of the increased cloud nucleation and the vortices coming off the leading edge of that aircraft and creating a vacuum that is decreasing the barometric pressure in that particular location as it passes over the wind or the wing or around the jet intake, or as it deals with the exhaust pressure that is coming out, which is also creating more particles as it goes through the air. So what you're seeing is the effects of the galactic cosmic rays interacting with the particles in our atmosphere, and as the planes fly through it, you get a much greater chemtrail. To give you something that would be similar to that is if you go down on the Indian River in Florida, which is on the east coast of the state of Florida, there is a certain part of the waterway down through there where the algae phosphorescence at night as you travel through it. So any fish that swims really quickly through it, it phosphoresces behind it, or any boat that passes through it, it phosphoresces behind it. Even a boat that's being towed and doesn't have its engine engaged, it will still phosphoresce behind that vessel. We're seeing the exact same thing in the atmosphere as it is disturbing that air, just like it is phosphorescing within the water. It is creating a condition within the atmosphere that is highly conducive to the individual particles rapidly accepting humidity and creating that condensation trail that you're seeing behind that aircraft. And if you study how clouds form at different altitudes, you will understand, as well as the loading of that aircraft. A empty aircraft will not leave as substantial an air contrail as an aircraft that is fully loaded. So that's the contrail. And they do clouds, they do weather modification, but it is so insignificant. There's not enough money in the world to do it to have an effect on the planet. It is temporary. They've done it. They've tested it. They know they don't have enough money to pay for it. It wouldn't matter if you got all of the money in the world. You still couldn't afford it to change what Mother Nature is getting ready to do to us, or the sun is getting ready to do to us. All right, and the third one?
The third one was HARP.
All right, now, HARP does not change the weather. Okay, guys, look, if they do some experiments up there, but you cannot change the weather pattern. I mean, look, how much power does it take just to heat up a cup of water inside your microwave oven? I mean, what are we talking about? 750, 1,000, 1,200 watts, goes for a whole minute, and we're only trying to heat up just a cup of water. Can you imagine how many millions of watts it would take to try to fire a beam up in the air? And then you're trying to get all of them to resonate within a specific area, which is the claim that these people make. You're trying to get all that to resonate within a specific area. And you're doing it in the middle of nowhere. So let's, number one, think about the size of the locomotive diesel engines that would be required to generate the power. Think about the fuel that would be required to take up there to try to run those things. And then my question is, where the hell do you hide when you turn that thing on? Because if you are resonating at a frequency that is going to resonate hydrogen molecules thousands of feet up in the air, 30,000 feet, 20,000 feet up in the air. I mean, dude, we're talking, 4 miles, 5 miles away. What do you think it's doing to the poor SOB that's standing underneath of the thing, turning it on? Okay, he's going to be a crispy critter in a matter of seconds. So, and you can't say, well, he's just going to go down there and get into a chamber. No, birds wouldn't be there. People couldn't be outside. It doesn't happen. I have looked at the antenna arrays. I have looked at the antennas themselves, the elements. I've looked at the coaxial cable that goes to them. I've looked at schematics of the facility, the frequencies that they operate in, the power generation capability, the size of the transmitters, and so on and so forth. No, HARP is not controlling the weather in any way, shape, or form. And there is substantial amount of official documentation from the U.S. government, from universities who have conducted research there, all peer-reviewed stuff. You can go in and see the types of experiments that they were conducting, the powers that were applied in those. You can do the math and quickly figure out that the facility has no way to generate the kind of power to do anything like that, nor do they have a way. The whole facility would have to be totally revamped with transmitters and so on and so forth to even think about that. And it would be much, much, much larger than what it is now. It would be more equivalent the size of the old Sugar Grove, West Virginia facility, if you can find documentation on that, because that facility has now been declassified, and I've spent a substantial amount of time underground there. I actually used to do communications for them. That's why I can speak intelligently, or somewhat very intelligently, on this particular subject. So HARP is out. What's the last one?
And finally, and I'm going to say this. I know where this question came from, and it's unfortunate because there's multiple channels that spread this kind of disinfo. So we have to stop every now and again and answer these questions, because the internet really does put it. There are certain people out there that will tell you that CERN is a satanic ritual. They do all these weird dances. None of that stuff ever happened. They get taken out of context.
It did. It happened at the tunnel opening, and it was because of the medallion thing that was part of that statue. And if they do the research on the statue, they'll find out that it's not a cult thing either. I mean, prior to my stroke, I went through and did all that research. I spent days. I called people at CERN. I called people in Switzerland. I reviewed all of the videos. I was like, what the hell is this? I looked up the medallion and everything. It has nothing like that. That is nothing more than pure propaganda of people who do not understand what is transpiring. They do not understand the culture. They do not understand why they did it. And then they confuse, because both of them are in the same country. They go, oh my God, CERN's there and they're digging a tunnel. The two have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Right. It's about it. They have about as much as common as this conversation and the price of eggs in China. And the fact of the matter is, the price of eggs in China is much more pertinent to this conversation, because we're talking about the increase in prices of food supplies and around the world. So yeah, they do not interact. They're not linked in any way, shape, or form. And right. CERN is not capable of doing anything like what some people, which I will remain unnamed. Okay, but there are people who have spread some of the most outrageous things I have ever heard. I have never laughed so hard after hearing what some of the people say that CERN and HARP and so on and so forth have said in regards to our weather and the magnetosphere.
Yeah, the last part of the question, and the reason why I said this, because all four of these parts really come from that community, but the last part is polar tilt. I'm not really sure what that means, but maybe you could make some sense of that.
Okay. Polar tilt refers to the Milankovitch, not the Milosevic, the Milankovitch cycle, and how our sun changes in what's referred, or excuse me, how the Earth changes in relationship to the sun in what is referred to as progression. So yes, that does play a slight hand into this as to where the cold weather is and how we move in our orbit in relationship to the sun, and the effects of all the gas giants being on one side and the increased possibility of substantial CMEs on the other side of the sun, opposed from those gas giants, just like we had the other day with AR 2665 as it went around on the far side of the sun and ejected out towards Mars. had we been in our orbital position in the same angle away from the sun as Mars was at that time, none of us would be having this conversation right now. So what we are dealing with is a true, clear, and present danger, and needs to be dealt with accordingly with proper preparation and ideas, as well as supplies put on hand to deal with what is coming and will inevitably affect everyone on this planet.
Yeah. And so with that, I hope, Connie, that answers your question. Again, it's just, you have to be careful with information anywhere, not just YouTube, but internet. Please vet your information. Lee, I wanted to go back to this real quick. We're jumping around, but we paused this for you because I know this is what you was talking about when you said it goes from black to white when it gets intense.
Yeah.
Is this what you were talking about?
Exactly what I was talking about. And, I was shocked, 18 months ago, 24 months ago, when I first started seeing these deep, dark blacks on the screen, the deep, dark reds. And it doesn't matter if you are talking about the altitude of the cloud or if you are talking about the amount of precipitation falling from the cloud, or you are talking about the amount of moisture in the cloud. When you see that dark red, that black, and then it turns white in the middle, like you're seeing in those two spots right there, it's ugly, and it doesn't matter which one of those three it is. So in this here, I think this is moisture. And that's just an unbelievable amount of moisture or precipitation or even cloud tops. It doesn't matter. Those are unbelievable storms, no matter how you look at it. And the deluges that they produced were unbelievable. I mean, Kansas City is being washed away. I've spent a lot of time in Kansas City. I did work for the city of Kansas City. I did work for Olathe, Kansas. And I know some of the video they were showing of the city. I know those streets. And I was like, my God, that's deep water, because I know how far that is from the water, the river there. So yeah, it's bad, and it's going to continue. And again, this is that stripe I've been talking about, going from over Colorado, New Mexico, all the way over to the eastern part of the United States, going right over through, right above Tennessee, going right across West Virginia, and going up into the Northeast. This is almost the exact same pattern I predicted 18 months ago. This is almost the exact same pattern. It's just a little higher north than we had when we lost 30% of the wheat crop in western Kansas and had the snows in Colorado and the snows in Kansas during the spring wheat tour in Kansas. Here we've got this flooding. I've told everybody that I think by the time the entire crop is out of the field in Kansas, and everybody has assessed at what was lost in Kansas this year, we're going to be approaching close to 50% in some regions, and could be approaching actually up to 50% in the entire state of Kansas, which produces 1/5 of all the wheat in the continental United States. So that'll be devastating. And then we've had all kinds of other crops that have been destroyed all over the United States and in other countries as well. This is an everyday occurrence now, and it's only getting worse, much faster than I ever thought it would.
And I've heard this over and over again, people saying that the people that support the grand solar minimum, we don't, that as if we're trying to say this is normal. Nobody in this channel, nobody in this community is saying anything from these effects. The volcano activity, the earthquakes, the flooding, all the weather. Nobody in this community has ever said it's normal. We're doing the exact opposite. That's why we're talking about this, because this is not normal. We're just here to inform people that this happens. What is happening is normal. The grand solar minimum is a cycle. The grand solar minimum. It's a cycle. So the only thing that's normal about this event is the fact that it happens in a cycle. Other than that, none of this is normal.
Right. It happens on a 206-year cycle, and we're in the phase where it's going to rain and flood and unbelievable storms, and people are going to starve. There's going to be food shortages. There's going to be catastrophic devastation to the infrastructure of this country and other countries around the world, via by volcanic eruption or seismic activity in rupturing power lines, water lines, fuel lines, natural gas lines, rail lines, highways, bridges. And those things are not just going to be broken. In this type of scenario, they are destroyed. So when you've got 80% probability of multiple locations around the Earth having either seismic or volcanic activity between now and 2030, you need to be waking up and paying attention, because 2030 is only 12 and a half years away. So, wake up and smell the coffee, folks.
And that's the thing.
And that's between now and then. I mean, it could happen tomorrow is the thing about it. It's not a matter of, oh, it's going to happen in 2030. It could happen tomorrow.
It could.
I mean, we're that far. When you talk about moving into these things and when these things go off, we're talking about a substantial possibility of these going off before the end of this cycle, or definitely before the end of the next cycle. So you're definitely talking about within the next 12 years. So... yeah, crazy stuff.
Well, and again, if you don't want to take this seriously, if you think this is, just some kind of joke or some kind of competition out there, that's fine. That's your choice. All we can do is give you the information. If you don't want to use it and be productive with it, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, but that's your problem. I know Leah and I, this is something that Lee has been passionate about since I've met Lee. A lot of things that I've done for research has helped me understand a lot about our solar system. I've learned so much. I continue to learn so much every day. But folks, this is serious. And, we're not out here doing on Friday nights. There's things that people could be doing on a Friday night. We're not old people. But we feel this issue is very important, and we want people to understand why it's happening. Not just to know it's happening, but we want people to understand so they don't get caught with their pants down when the situation gets worse. And right now, in the last month or so, I can't believe how much of an increase the intensity of the weather, the floods, the hail is unbelievable. So I think tonight was a good discussion. We covered a lot of things tonight. We answered some questions. Please be looking out for our interview with Valentina Zarkova, and thanks to Lee Wheelbarger. He's the guy that introduced me to her work. And Lee, thank you again for being on our show, The Big Picture. This is your platform. So thank you again for coming out tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. And now people understand why I wanted to call the show The Big Picture, because there is so much to it. You've got to look at the whole big picture to be able to see it. And, I'm really thrilled that you guys are actually getting to the point of where you can actually recognize what's going on, see it, realize what is taking place, and go, wow, yeah, there's an example of it. Here's another example of it.
Yeah. And
then as you continue on, you'll get to the point of where you'll be able to predict it and say, yeah, look at this, look at this. And we'll go through that. People want to know how I predict the stuff. As we go into these shows, I'll break down each individual thing and say, all right, here's the graph. Here's the other graph. Look at what we did here historically. Look at what we're doing now. Look at where we were with TSI. Look at where we are now. Look at where we were with galactic cosmic rays. Look at where we are now. Right. And then when you do the math of the differences, and then you throw in all of the increased aerosols, and you also look at the fact of the long-term trend of the sun. We're talking the 3,000-year cycle here. When you're looking at the long-term trend of the sun, we're already coming off the crest of that, headed down. We're going through this. We've got Valentina Zarkova's work saying that we're going 180 degrees out of phase. So of all the indicators that we have on the sun, sometimes one or two go down, but the rest stay up. In this particular case, they're all going downhill. Yep. And they're doing it quickly. And that is why I am spending my time, my effort, my dime to do all of this research, make all of these calls, go to all these meetings, interview all of these people. So as that while we still have time to get the word out, we can get the word out. And those who are wise enough to heed our wisdom will survive and thrive. Those who do not heed our wisdom and do not learn from history, because those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So those who do not learn from this history will repeat it. And the way some of my friends put it, we call that chlorine in the gene pool.
Yeah.
So,
well, and to all the new people
survive.
here, and to all the new people here, you know, stick around for a little while, because Lee just made the comment that he was thrilled about how Mari and I are starting to look at this and we see it now. But it took some time. This was not just a couple of weekends of research or even a few months. Our research is ongoing. And like Lee said, this is the big picture. And you have to look at it like that. There's not one particular factor that you can put your finger on that says, oh, that's it. That's the constant. There are so many things that get thrown into the pile here. So again, that's the reason why we call this the big picture with Lee Wheelbarger. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Stay tuned. We will give an announcement when we have the exact time that we will release the interview with Valentina Zarkova. We are very thrilled. Again, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk soon. See you, Lee.
Good night, folks. Thanks for coming.